So Robert, we were talking about the harmonics of the solar system and how they're echoed, or how we can see them here on planet Earth, or with instrumentation or whatnot. Basically, looking at nature and then seeing it either microcosmically or macrocosmically. So can you touch on Bode's law?
Yeah, that's the way that in this vortex solar system, that would be the way that the planets are spaced electrically between each other. And they do conform to Bode's law. Let's see, I've got it up here right now. I'm looking at it. And if you just get rid of this idea of gravity and you substitute electricity and you look at the solar system, there you have, that's like the Rosetta Stone. I mean, there's the proof that you have that you can use for the rest of the universe. And because we have all these really far out ideas about these things that are happening so-called hundreds of millions of light years away and all this stuff, and they're all totally based on gravity. And if we could substitute this understanding of electricity, like they're doing a pretty good job at Thunderbolts. You're hip to their work.
Yeah, definitely.
Thornhill, yeah.
And David Talbot. Yeah, Dave Talbot. Yeah, those guys, they've got some good ideas, but unfortunately, they are somewhat academic themselves. And, they've held on to some ideas like plasma, for instance. I mean, plasma is based on the nuclear theory of the atom. So it's a false concept. And it's so important that we actually get the correct terminology and the correct understanding of these things if we're going to be studying them. And unfortunately, I think that's one of the failures that they're holding on to, one of these knowledge viruses that's picked up from academia.
Yeah, well, it seems like it's almost built that way intentionally. I mean, not to hit the conspiracy angle again, but just that anyone who really wants to make a break into academia has to use this kind of predetermined set of linguistics that we already know is such a poor tool, at least the specific vocabulary that modern academia has. It's such a poor tool to explain the phenomena that we actually can observe.
Exactly, and very well stated.
So it's actually all too good to have you today, given only last week, very recently, we heard a supposedly very, very big announcement coming out of LIGO, the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory, which seems to be telling us that we have actually found evidence of gravitational waves. Now, given everything we've been talking about for the last hour is on the basis that gravity is fundamentally non-existent, I'm curious how you have come to interpret this supposedly new scientific breakthrough.
Well, first of all, it's pure BS. I mean, the article itself said that it was all speculation and rumor. So I don't know how people got from that article that this was a fact. I mean, it seems that people can't read clearly now. I mean, people get so elated or something on speculation and sensationalistic media rumors that they lose their minds. I mean, I haven't seen it claimed anywhere that there was proof of this. I've seen that they're saying that possibly in a couple of weeks or something there's a meeting and maybe they just might release this information. It's like, that's a huge stretch. Let's stick with reality. And of course, the thing is a joke to begin with, because Pari Spolter is actually the one that exposed it to me in her work. And she's got a very good video series with Kim Greenhouse that I've got mirrored on my channel. I say Gravity Theories of Newton and Einstein Demolished by a Housewife is the name of the series.
Oh my gosh.
And she talks about it. She's actually got a PhD, but she was a housewife. And she had been really upset with the science that she was seeing done, and really upset with all these people trying to constantly prove Einstein, as if that's the whole goal of science. And yet all these big projects fail. As she said, a 19% data correlation is a massive failure. And so there is no if they were to come out and say that they'd found it, it would be just a pure lie. I mean, the data does not add up to that at all. LIGO has been a monumental failure. It's cost taxpayers $1.1 billion of taxpayer slavery. And that's the way this racket's run. They do stuff like the Kobe satellite was the same stuff, trying to prove Einstein. Another $1 billion wasted there. Steve Mather's got a fake Nobel Prize for it. Saul Perlmutter was another fraud involved in this stuff. A really excellent site. Have you seen Beavis Day's work, Ryan?
No, I just heard about him through one of the previous casts that you did, and I have not actually checked him out yet.
Well, he's actually an alumni of ours from UC San Diego. He graduated before I did, and he's from Indonesia, and he's got an excellent site called Physics in the Age of Fakery, and he's actually gone through and busted all this fake science being done, these massive megalithic projects costing billions of dollars, enslaving taxpayers, and it's all to try to prove Einstein was right. And we all know he's wrong. I mean, Einstein has been debunked in every way, shape, and form since the beginning of his idiotic theories. It's just you never hear about it from the Jewish media. If you go study this stuff, you'll see that people have been protesting against these Doomkopf theories from the very get-go.
Yeah, I've been really compelled with what you're saying related to black holes. I know that there's, like you're saying, a lot's been debunked, and I know that black holes have been something that have been spoken about a lot. Yet when physicists and scientists are confronted, they don't really have an answer for what they are, and they can't actually define them.
Yet the apparent...
Nor can they show you one.
Yeah, exactly.
Yet the gravitational waves that LIGO is just announcing are apparently found because two black holes finally met, which it's just crazy.
Oh, boy. I mean, they haven't even found one, yet two meet each other. It's ridiculous. I mean, there's no such thing as a black hole. I mean, this is the sci-fi garbage. This is all they got. It's really sad. In fact, Stephen Hawking, he actually got his entire fame for describing the motions mathematically around a non-existent black hole.
Yeah.
And he's the smartest man of the 20th century, according to these eggheads. I mean, it's ridiculous. We're looking at a pseudoscience that is so preposterous that it's hard for me to believe anybody can buy it. I can understand how these people get conditioned to it, brown-nosing their professors and their teachers all the way through the thing, to get their degree. I can understand how those people get it. But your average person, I mean, if you have a little bit of common sense, these things should sound like the most ridiculous things you've ever heard of.
Well, I think that's such a great segue to the thoughts I'm having really passionately at this moment, which is I've based so much of my spiritual beliefs in the last year on quantum physics, on this kind of marrying of science and energy. It's been such an exciting time, and you keep hearing, all these people coming out, and you feel like we're making these strides. And then I start listening to your work. I start researching some of the theories, and I have to be honest, it makes me feel a little frightened, a little shaken, because what does that mean for how I move forward as a spiritual being? What's my next step, in your opinion?
Well, you just have to find the truth. You have to convince yourself of the truth, which is not taught to us. You have to look at their stuff, debunk it, understand. I mean, I've got 2 really good chapters in my book, on quantum mechanics, debunking it. I've got an 1.5 hour long video interview where I tear through the Tao of physics, and that, by Fritz Capra. That book alone is probably responsible for the delusion of the whole New Age culture. I think that really set the foundation for all this kind of observer psychosis and stuff like, if you're not there looking at it, it doesn't exist and all that crap. I mean, that's just, it's ridiculous, So you just have to, debunk that stuff for yourself and move on, because all these so-called spiritual claims, like in Tao physics, they try to say, well, these insights in quantum mechanics match, the insights of these great yogis and sages. They don't at all. I mean, the information's not, garnered in the same way at all. It's not received the same way. I mean, the yogis find it from self-knowledge, from going within. These quacks, they've come up with all these ridiculous theories that are based on a couple of frauds, as we just said earlier, the Heisenberg uncertainty principle and the shell game that's called the double slit experiment. So those foundations are provably false. So there's, I don't like to sit there and argue all the various points of quantum. It would be like trying to argue this LIGO thing and all their various things. You got to go for the Achilles heel of this stuff. You go in and you say, look, this is the foundations and they are fraudulent. So all speculation and all inventive theory built upon those foundations, it's not even worth addressing. And so that's the way I try to approach these things. It's go for the Achilles tendon, get rid of the whole thing, bring down the support columns, and get back to reality,
So for you then, on a spiritual level, would you say that reality outside of all these, these false maths and these false sciences that we've been connecting with spirituality, would it be taking steps towards just being in nature? Would it be towards looking into, you mentioned Hinduism earlier. What's your inspiration for truth of a text or a way of thinking that's already been written?
Well, my truths and my favorite people to look into would be like, Schauberger, for instance. I mean, he's somebody who's completely immersed in nature and living in nature myself and making those observations. And in order to do that, what I found for me personally is the best way to get into that space is to hike. You spend an hour and a half in the morning out walking. And if you can turn off that chitter chatter stuff that's going on in your brain from the external stuff, and you can get into your own flow of consciousness, that self-knowledge is within you, then you would be amazed at how many things are revealed to you in that process. And I found that most of my stuff that I've been inspired through has been come through walking in nature, being out in nature.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, I mean, knowing you went to UCSD, we're all living in San Diego here, so we're familiar with the area and, I mean, the kind of crazy hustle and bustle city life that is San Diego. I'm curious just to have you expand on that idea. Once you moved away and, I mean, really immersed yourself within nature, how much that helped your work and your understanding of everything we've been discussing?
It always has. I grew up in nature. I was actually raised on a cattle ranch out in northern Mississippi, just outside of Clarksdale. And so as a child, I was fully immersed in nature. We had a beautiful little ranch with about a 6-acre pond behind the house filled with big snapping turtles and bass and brim and crappie. And, I was fishing all the time. I was in the woods. And so it was deeply, deeply imprinted within my consciousness and my life at a very early age, the beauty of nature, and when we left there, it was really the downfall of my life. Things went way, way downhill, for the rest of my life until I could get back into nature and be out in the country and where I was happy. I've always been trying to get back to where I was as a child, fully immersed in nature.
Yeah, I mean, that I think is such a huge idea because I for the most part, I mean, probably 90+% of my life, I've been immersed in those kind of larger cities. And the times I do take to go out and immerse myself in nature and disconnect from cell phones and Wi-Fi and all that stuff, there's a quietude you do not find elsewhere. Like you can be sitting in your house or your room or whatever in a city and be completely quiet, but there's still this like almost intangible noise in the background that it's completely absent in nature. And there's this stillness that I don't think you find anywhere else.
You got that right. That's where you find stillness, out in places where I'm at right now. At night, you don't hear anything. I mean, you can hear a pin drop across the canyon. It's so quiet. So, I have to be in this kind of environment. I am so, due to all this research and stuff, I am so against this explosion-based nightmare and having to listen to Harley Davidsons and helicopters and, Rice rockets and leaf blowers. And it's a torture session, and my nervous system just cannot deal with this racket, this explosion-based bullshit. And I think about 15 to 20% of all disease is caused from noise directly, the research I've seen.
Wow. Yeah, the thing when you keep talking about nature, I'm going back to Russellian science, where the reason why it just seems to work for me is that he is basing his science off of nature. And the one thing that just keeps coming up for me in my life and for what you're saying is that everything in nature is seeking equilibrium, right? Or rest.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to talk back into gravity and go, this same thing that people say. They go, wait a second, you can't get me to listen to you if you're telling me that gravity doesn't exist. Watch, I just dropped this apple, or I just dropped this rock, and I was hoping you could talk about that before. Again, where people will just go, look, man, gravity exists, and then they go, this object is attracted to this object because they're two masses, and maybe you could expand on that.
Well, you see, gravity didn't exist until Newton invented it. Before that, things just fell, right? I mean, something fell off there's leaves that fall in the fall. That's why they call it the fall. I mean, things would just fall. That nobody thought of this term gravity. Gravity is a mythical force that Newton invented and applied to Kepler's third equation, which was sufficient by itself to explain planetary motion. And unfortunately, this is the problem, and it's actually wrong. I mean, Newton added the product of two masses. He added masses to Kepler's equation, which ruined the whole thing and meant that all of a sudden, depending on your mass, you had more gravity or less gravity, and that's all BS. I mean, Pari Spolter's work actually shows all the latest observations within the solar system, and it proves beyond any doubt that Newton's universal law of gravitation is in fact false, and that Kepler's third law is in fact correct. So we've got all these academics, using this gravity law, which is false, which means that, you look at something like their claims about the gravity on the moon being 1/6 of the Earth's because it's 1/6 the size. Well, this busts NASA and their entire Apollo program by itself, because the so-called gravity on the moon is identical to the Earth. What's happening is due to density and electrical compression. It's not that there's not a force. It's just that the force is electricity. It's not gravity. So people get all hung up. It's like, that we can see that there's gravity. Well, it's not gravity. It's electricity. It's due to electrical compression and electrical potential. And that's what so-called gravity is. It's not a force by itself. And this is the failure of the whole gravity theory.
Gotcha.
Yeah, well, just to rewind a little bit, when we were talking about Bode's law just a minute ago, I was curious in relation to looking at that through the lens of gravity not existing and electricity being kind of the arbiter of that organization. You were kind of starting to talk in the pre-show about the kind of octave that creates. I was curious if you could expand on that idea a little bit.
Yeah, well, I've not deeply educated on this subject of Bode's law by itself, but from what I've read, there's a lot of complaints that at the seventh planet it falls off and it falls apart. Bode's law does. And I've seen other research that says, well, that's because it's octaves, just like, the octaves of matter, the octaves of sound, the octaves of light. Everything is electrical to begin with. Those things are electrical, and they work in octaves. So the so-called helical trajectories of these planets are based on octaves as well. So you would have to start on the eighth planet as being the number one, and then it would begin again a next octave. In the distance relationships.
Yeah, well, that makes me think back. I mean, we were talking about chakras earlier, and it makes me see the relationship between them. And I think that's almost kind of a breadcrumb to indicate the kind of fractal nature of our universe.
There you go, the seven chakras. Yeah, I mean, everything seems to be based on octaves.
Yeah.
Because foundationally, everything is based on electrical octaves from the elements up. So how can anything not be that? I mean, everything is based on the foundations which give everything its form in this universe.
Yeah, and I mean, I know Ryan is far more well versed with Walter Russell than myself, as I only found him a handful of months ago. But if I'm not mistaken, those same octaves and kind of harmonic rules are what kind of create, I guess, what we are falsely calling the atom, or those kind of fundamental pieces, if you will.
The element.
Yeah, the elements. Thank you.
Yeah, the elements would be the proper term because atoms don't exist.
Yeah.
I mean, atom actually means indivisible particle. I mean, that was the original meaning.
Right.
And then they found out, oh no, there's other particles inside that, and then there's other particles in those, and the more they crash, they get quarks and leptons and baryons and all this other garbage.
Okay, so
And they're just naming spinning trails and bubble chambers.
So I heard you speak of this
Go ahead,
before when you were we were talking about the nature of the atom, and so if I have it correctly, and it's electric waveforms, when someone goes, well, what about this electron? What about this proton? What's actually happening there is that there isn't a particle called an electron. There is not a particle called a proton, but they are moving in electrical waves in ring systems out. Is that correct?
Well, there are ring systems and there's spheres in octaves. In an octave, the at the 90-degree mark, the center of the octave would be a spherical or semi-spherical element. And the three elements before it would have 1, 2, and 3 inert gas rings, and the three after would have 3, 2, 1 inert gas rings, and then back into the next octave. So it's rings and spheres. And if we look out at the cosmos, what do we see? We see rings and spheres.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm curious how you think, or if at all, the shape of a torus would fit into this. Is there's a lot of talk about toroidal spheres or double toruses in kind of this whole New Age movement that seems to be erupting.
Yeah, that's a huge diversion, though, because what the toruses are discharge phenomena through the equatorial, band. They are death. Life is the polar charging through the polar vortices is what gives life to something. The equator is where death discharge happens. So they're concentrating on death like everything else in nature. Everything that these scientists are looking at is the dying side. If you look at a galaxy, what do you see? You see all the lights lit up, but that's all the death side of it. You don't see the invisible polar vortices that are giving form to that galaxy. That's life, where the implosion of cold space through the poles and creating those big star fields that are in these huge discharging vortices through the equator of the galaxy.
Yeah, well, that makes me think immediately about the kind of the vertical, I guess you would say, imploding energy when you look at a galaxy. I mean, we see they're kind of a horizontal disk-esque shape, but there are these kind of vertical, I guess they call them ejections, but I would say, given our conversation, it might be an injection where they're flowing into this center piece of a galaxy.
Yeah, there's twin opposing vortices that are flowing in, but also there are galactic jets which are bursting out is like beams through the center of those vortices. You've seen those, right?
Yeah,
the galactic
jets.
Certainly.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
yes.
their black holio theory morphed into that once they started seeing these things, and they're all like, "Oh, well, black hole is supposed to be sucking in light everywhere, and light can't escape." But now they got these twin jets that are coming out of black holes. And it's like, at the middle of a galaxy, there's a black hole, but what do you see at the middle of a galaxy? A massive spherical light, the exact opposite. Yeah. So, I mean, it's ridiculous.
That's amazing. That's just amazing right there. Just to think about those implications. They'll say exactly that light cannot, escape, and then right in front of you, it's escaping. So why can't they just scratch that theory and go, okay, we're wrong. Let's revise.
Right. It's just like gravitational lensing. They say, oh yeah, the gravity is lensing the lights. There's only electrical lensing. Everything they're calling gravity is electrical. So, there are electrical lenses out there. In fact, the entire basis of creation is based upon these electrical lenses. If you look at Russell's stuff, that's what it's all about. It's all about electric light lenses and how they bend light to create various geometric shapes and forms.
So I have a question for you, Robert, that's a little out there, but my brain's kind of spinning right now, and I want to see where it goes. But I'm thinking about the Platonic great year, or the precession of the equinox, and this potential binary object that we're supposedly rotating around. And I mean, that whole theory is built on, again, this idea of gravity being a mutual attractor between the two. But if it's an electric potential, I'm curious if the proximity we're into, whatever this supposed binary thing is that we're rotating around causing the precession, I'm wondering if the electric potential of that being closer, given we now, as we've been discussing, we know that everything manifest is an electrical phenomena. I'm wondering if an external electric influence like that could have some of these major changes that, say, the Vedas refer to.
It could, but you're talking about Cruttenden's binary star theory, right?
Yeah.
Well, I don't buy it. I don't buy it because, first of all, we don't see it. It's like, oh, it's out there, but we can't find it. That's that kind of mentality.
Yeah, that always
like
bugged
a lot
me
of
myself.
Yeah, that I don't like that at all. And what the problem is the sun has its own natural corkscrewing, trajectory. It's spiraling itself, right? Because it was birthed from another star. At some point long ago, there was a supernova, and it shot it out in a spiral trajectory. It doesn't need another sun to create that spiral trajectory. It's created through its birth, and it continues onward. So I don't buy this idea that there's another star out there that's causing these things, is because it's a natural phenomena of the birth. And also, I would say that it's exactly the opposite of what they're saying. They're saying mutual attraction of heavenly bodies in space, which has been disproved. Through W.C. Wright's work, it's actual mutual repulsion. So that kind of invalidates their theory right there. But yeah, the process is all electrical anyway. So I don't buy it. I don't believe there's another star out there doing this. I think it's totally a natural phenomena.
Okay, so does that also imply that planets, like orbits, don't exist? That planets are actually not really orbiting each other?
Exactly. They're helical trajectories. So
Right.
yeah, they're not orbiting. And the moons are the same way. They're kicked out. They're giving their trajectories when they're birthed from the planets. So all these things spiral out. And everything's not being sucked in by gravity. It's like, oh no, if the moon's going to crash into the earth, if or whatever, these ridiculous kind of theories they come up with, everything's actually moving away from where they're born. The latest one kicked out was Mercury for the sun. Mercury will move to the position of Venus, or roughly that position, when the next planet is born. And electrically, all the rest of the planets will be pushed out further as well, because it's all an electrical process, and everything will conform to Bode's law as it does.
Okay, so can I ask you, like, would you consider yourself, in philosophical terms, or I guess this would be scientific terms as well, like, would you consider yourself a hermeticist? And also, would you consider Walter Russell or Victor Schauberger a hermeticist?
I'm definitely a hermeticist, and Walter Russell, obviously, I really doubt his 39-day illumination experience. I can't live my life in faith on people's descriptions like that. There are some very serious problems with Russell's work that I should probably bring up real quickly. That one being that he said he's the reincarnation of Leonardo da Vinci, and his wife Daisy, who's falsely called Lao, she is the reincarnation of Lao Tse. Now, those require faith, and that becomes a cult of personalities, and you have to have faith in these people for these things. The truth of the matter is that the Kybalion was written in 1908, which was 18 years before Walter Russell wrote his Universal One, his very first book. And everything in all the foundational ideas are in the Kybalion that are in Russell's work. They're identical because they're Hermetic principles that have been with us for thousands of years. So, the very foundations of Russell's work, he probably got from Masons. I mean, this guy is building apartment complexes in New York City, and he's not hooked in with the Masons. I think that's pretty much impossible. All of his friends were high-ranking Masons. I mean, you don't hear much about this, in his work, but, he was friends with Carnegie and all these other, kings, queens, princes, presidents, all these Illuminati people. And that always bothered me, and it basically drove me away from his philosophy, because I never was interested in his philosophy, because it rang of New Age weirdness to me from the get-go. But once I started seeing the effect it was having on people that, some of my students, I started to have a look into it. And I found out that it's a lot of New Age garbage. In fact, at one point he had said that Mary Baker Eddy was the greatest illuminant since Christ, and she was a psychopath. And she's the one that created Christian Science.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you look at her life, it's a really sick story. She's a really strange woman into, channeling and demonism and channeling all the demonic spirits and all this crap. And so that was a massive, I didn't even know who she was. I'm like, it bothered me because it's an atomic suicide. And, I'm like, who's this Mary Baker Eddy? So I looked her up, started doing some research on her, found out she is a psychopath. And I would not put 1 ounce of credibility in her whatsoever,
Right. So the Kybalion thing you said interests me. So I've read the Kybalion, and I'm
Yeah.
definitely in line with Hermetic Principles. As long as they don't fall into a cult or cult of personality type of view. So
Anything
I'm wondering,
too dogmatic. Yeah.
Right.
yeah, exactly. So I'm wondering if the Kabbalion is really that recent. And I've heard that too. I've read that too, and I wondered. Then it had to be based. It's obviously based on other texts or other scripture. Do you have any idea like how old that information really is, or where it may have really originated? I mean, I'm just curious.
It probably goes back to Atlantis. I mean, the Egyptians had it for sure. It goes way, way back. It's the most ancient knowledge that there is. And the one thing I have to qualify about the Kabbalion, though, is it falls apart about halfway through the book. The first part is all about stating these Hermetic principles. The second part is how they interpreted that according to the science drivel of the time, which was nuke atoms and all this other garbage.
Right.
So the second half of the book is essentially worthless because it's all the false science of that time period of 1908, which these three initiates, these Masonic guys, whoever they were, incorporated into this idea of these Hermetic principles. So, I mean, that I want to qualify that because I don't want to mislead people saying, yeah, this is the truth, because it's not. It's but the Hermetic principles are core truths which have existed throughout. It's kind of like the flower of life symbol on Abydos. The post and lintel construction there at Abydos.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean,
Yeah,
what I mean?
Tyler's
I mean
got it
that,
tattooed on his arm.
beautiful.
True.
Yeah. That's the thing, man. The flower of life is the core because everything comes from it. All geometries in the universe come from the flower of life, and so here's a symbol on something that's 50 feet below the Egyptian stuff, buried in the sand. So it's probably, God knows, 25, 30, 50,000 years
definitely
old, and there's the
pre-dynastic to some
flower of
extent.
life on it. You know. Yeah.
Not to mention, we find the symbol, ubiquitously through a ton of ancient cultures. I know, like, some of the ancient food dogs in China are holding, like, a three-dimensional representation of the flower of life.
Yes.
And, I mean,
yes.
I'm sure there's a bunch more that I can't come up with off the top of my head, but that's definitely a ubiquitous symbol throughout antiquity.
Okay, so
all of them. The Hindu have it, the Sufis, the Muslims. The Muslims are heavy into sacred geometry. It's just so little known in our culture because we're brainwashed with Einstein and the Zionist science,
Well, to your point, you mentioned earlier, is we've taken the creator out of creation. And until you can acknowledge that, something like sacred geometry is moot, because how do you differentiate between traditional geometry and sacred without acknowledging the creator using that particular set of rules?
Absolutely. And I think the Chestahedron, Frank's work is the ultimate validation of all this stuff for all of us. I mean, it's just mind-blowing what Frank has done,
Yeah,
with this Chestahedron.
Man, as much as I look into him, it's so revelatory. I think a lot of people might have a hard time understanding, again, connecting the dots, the implication of what Frank Chester has done. But man, anybody out there listening, it's incredible work that I think he's, it's going to take our civilization like a little bit of time to catch up with the implications of what he's doing. Yeah. But I mean, if you can speak on that right now, anything would be amazing. Like the biggest thing I take from that is like he has found a 7-sided shape, which he calls the Chestahedron, and it exists in nature. However, it exists, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Robert, but it exists in the side of nature that we can't actually see. It's sort of like the negative, like the negative side of a photograph, right? Like it's like that side that
Precisely.
It's amazing. Like he's like literally like gone into, I don't know if it's the 4D. I don't know if it's another dimension or what. But
no, it's not. It's not. It's the still magnetic light kingdom. These are all magnetic space geometries, just like the invisible cubes of space. There are other geometries. Every geometry imaginable exists in the invisible space geometries, and the Chestahedron is actually the form that creates the human heart. Within the mirrors of that are given the twin opposing vortices which control the human heart. The human heart is not a pump. The human heart is an implosion regulator. The body is sucked. The blood is sucked through the body. It's not pumped through the body. And this is where you have all this delusion. Oh, your poor heart, you're getting old. It's pumped so much blood. Oh man, that heart's wearing out. You're just gonna have to die of a heart attack pretty soon. It's absolutely ridiculous. there's 10 G's of suction in the heart, which means that's like 1 G is like what you see going down your bathtub, as it spirals down your bathtub.
Yeah.
It's 10 of those.
Wow.
That's how much suction, because it's pulling blood through your capillaries, not pumping them. Imagine if it was under pressure. It's like your capillaries would be blowing out everywhere in your whole body, right?
Right. But this is amazing. These implications are amazing. Like if medical science would just confirm that, which I know that that's true because I've looked at Frank Chester's work. Like I already know that he's correct. But like if the mainstream would confirm that, just imagine the paradigm shift that it would take on not only just the human body and how to treat it, but you're okay. Like what I'm saying is that right now we are working against nature when there's a heart condition, and we do it as protocol, standard, daily, right? So all these things that we do, that's just one reflection of our approach being wrong, and people need to like look into this stuff,
Absolutely. And this has been known of since Leonardo da Vinci's time. He understood this. Steve Booner also, you hip to his work, The Secret Life of Plants?
No.
He also understood these things as well. This is not new knowledge. This is a confirmation of old knowledge, and it's also a validation of these invisible magnetic space geometries in the unseen world, which gives form to all these spiraling electric waveforms that we call matter and substance in our electric universe.
Wow, that's incredible. And that okay. So also, if I'm not mistaken, the human heart is okay. So the chestahedron is a 7-sided form, but the human heart is also wrapped in such a way to where there's 7 different types of muscle fiber, and they wrap around each other and they make this vortex, and they fire electricity. They fire different electrical pulses, and they don't go like the one closest to the next one goes, and then the one closest to the next one goes. They go like sort of like I don't know how to say it. They kind of like ping back and forth. And apparently, if that rhythm is off, like if the first one and the fourth one don't fire at the correct time, that's when we start running into heart issues. And so it's amazing that this harmonic of 7 is coming up again, and Frank Chester has found the 7-sided form that like fully encodes this information.
Right. And he's proved this empirically, and he's put this thing in a water vortex and is able to reproduce the aorta of the heart and stuff. And he shows that they are twin opposing vortices, as above, so below. All of creation is based upon twin opposing vortices. So is the human heart. And it's really funny. They talk about us. They're always worried about the blood pressure. Oh man, you need to get on blood pressure medicine and all this other crap. You see all these idiotic commercials on the idiot box. I had to turn it off 20 years ago because all those idiotic drug commercials, they were driving me insane.
Yeah.
They're all about blood pressure. Yeah, it's ridiculous. And they're talking about blood pressure. There's no blood pressure. The pressure is in the bag that they blow up that's around your freaking arm. That's pressure. When the suction of the blood overcomes the pressure, then they call that blood pressure, which is a fraud,
That is amazing.
You see what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no such thing. It's bag pressure. Call it a bag pressure.
Well, to kind of just transition to another idea for a brief moment, I'm curious. We actually all 3 just went to a lecture not long ago to hear Mrryanmcmahon speak about his whole concept of the Schwarzschild proton or the black hole proton or anything like that. And clearly, I'm not sure how familiar you are with his work, but it's all based on the kind of existing paradigm that we've been working to debunk this last hour and a half or so. And I'm just curious, if you are familiar with his work, how or what you think of that philosophy or his idea and concept there.
I think he's 100% fraudulent. I think he's a total shill, and he's been friends with Foster Gambler, the Foster Gamble family, since the 80s stuff. These people are criminals of extreme. These pricks are the ones that created that, toxic shock syndrome that killed a bunch of women, maimed a bunch of other ones. You could put this tampon in your vagina and leave it for a week. A bunch of them died and stuff. And these people are creeps. These people people are subhuman, filth as far as I'm concerned. He's this whole Thrive bullshit. This is the biggest fraud ever imaginable. They're pushing donuts. He and Nauseam are flying around the universe in these donuts and stuff. They spend $1 million on all these cool graphics and all this garbage. All his stuff is 100% academic. The torus is going nowhere. They'll never have free energy with his Schwarzschild proton garbage. I mean, there is no nuclear atom. I just tell you flat out, the guy's a shill, and so are many other New Age gurus. I mean, he's not the only one. There's several others, that have become very famous.
I definitely had to get skeptical when I saw, that Gamble was behind Thrive. I mean, why would someone of that stature and with that heritage seemingly change their position on such a coin flip? So I was always skeptical of it. So it's interesting to hear your response. That's definitely thought provoking.
Yeah, I have no respect for those people, and I just think it's sad. I saw a video of Nassim it was called the One Heart Festival at Swannanoa in 2009. I have a copy of it actually, and somebody had forwarded it to me. I looked it over. It was 100% drivel. He massively misrepresented Walter Russell's work, claimed he had all the same ideas. He wanted to patent them, that he saw them in Atomic Suicide. It's total BS to the extreme. I mean, his representation of Walter Russell's work was totally false, and so I just have to think he's part of the agenda, that he's been paid to do this, just as other New Age shills, these New Age guru types that are out there. Some of the other ones would be like Drunbalo Melchizedek. He's a huge fraud.
I've heard that from so many people.
Yeah,
too.
Flower of Life. Oh, God. And a money monger. Just all for Bernard Perona is his real name. I mean, he's got to give himself this title like he's this reincarnation of some great fucking illuminated being. That's
that always weirded me out.
It sickens me to the core of my soul.
If you think about Nassim as well, it's an openly stated belief on his end, and I think from his research project that he's forwarding and continuing the research of Einstein. I mean, that's what he was talking about during this entire this entire talk, was he said, I'm actually continuing the work of Albert Einstein. So if we're really connecting that to everything we've said for the last hour and a half, it's like, oh, well, maybe you are continuing it.
That's a good point.
Maybe that's true.
A good point.
Very good point. He is a 100% shill. There's no question of mine. The Schwarzschild proton, it's ridiculous. Oh, I got peer reviewed. So who gives a shit? There's no nuclear atom.
Because that means it's something all of a sudden, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's just ridiculous. It's best to just turn your head away from people like that and ignore them.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Thanks so much for all this so far. As we begin to wrap up here, is there anything that you wanted to get out to the people before we start to run out of time here?
I can't think of anything. I just, I've given all of this for free to, like my book, the 1,200 page, Free Energy and Free Thinking. That's a massive research site, really. I mean, you can go on there and access hundreds of websites and hundreds of videos. I mean, don't take my word for it. I don't want anybody to follow me or anything. I'm not remotely interested in being a leader or anything. I'm just trying to share with humanity what I've learned, because I'm sick of living in this hellhole. I don't like the debt-based money system. It's a total fraud. It's total slavery. The energy-based slavery, these false flag wars, the pollution, the destruction, the death. I'm opposed to all of this shit, So
we're right there with you. That's really why we have this show in the first place, is to do just that.
I can feel y'all are resonating. We're all on the same page, and we want a better world. And I don't do this for money. I don't do it for fame. I don't do it for to get a title or anything. All I care about is raising this, humanity out of this pit of ignorance we've all been mind controlled into. And I was mind controlled into the same pit, just like everyone else. It's just I got a kind of wake up call back in, like we were talking about earlier, in 1976. That kind of opened my eyes. And so a lot of people aren't blessed with something like that in an early age. So it might take them 9/11 might be their wake up call or something,
Right.
They start realizing, hey, things just don't add up,
Especially when we were talking about with the school system, you have so much unlearning to do before you can even start asking those questions.
Correct. God.
That's it. You got to deprogram yourself from all this garbage,
Well, man, we really appreciate, your your insight into this, and we're just going to continue, provoking people to think, and open their minds.
Yeah.
I think Julie, you have another question for him, real quick.
Well, actually, it's a little off the point of all these amazing deep thoughts you just had, but I've noticed you're very connected with the number 7. And I wanted to ask what your connection with that number is, the vibrational significance in your life.
Well, intuitively, it felt just right. I just picked that right off the top when I jumped onto YouTube back in 2008.
Oh, wow.
But if you want to get into 7, it's everywhere. I mean, I think probably one of the greatest influences that made it resonate with me was Gerald Massey's work on Ancient Egypt, Light of the World. Have you read that?
Yeah, I have. I've read parts of it.
Yeah, it's a huge 2-volume, history of ancient Egypt, and basically comparative mythology showing that the whole Christ myth was based upon the Horus, Isis, Osiris myth and all that. But you cannot believe how deep 7 is embedded into the Egyptian culture. The first division of the heavens was actually called the Heptonymus. It was a 7-sided heaven, and it went to 9 and eventually to 12. But 7 is heavily encoded in all of the ancient Egyptian stuff. It's the octaves are all 7s. Light, sound, everything's related to the 7.
7 Hermetic Principles.
Yeah, exactly.
The 7 Hermetic Principles, the Chestahedron. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And 3 7s at the slot machine, and you win a bunch of dough.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you for sharing that.
Everywhere.
Well, guys, this is, again, Robert Otey. His website is feandft.com, short for freeenergyandfreethinking.com. You can get his books on there and a litany of other things. Of course, again, his YouTube channel, 77G Slinger. And we will have links to all of Robert's work in our show notes if you're curious, as well as on revealingreality.com. So, again, Robert, thank you so much for taking time out of your day, man. This is truly a pleasure. I'm so excited we had a chance to do this with you.
It's been such an honor.
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you so much.
And thank you to y'all. I'm very humbled by it just makes me so happy to see younger folks getting into, who knows how long I'll be around, but I know that people like you will carry, the torch after I'm gone, and you will teach other people to carry the torch. And hopefully we can overcome this darkness that this world has been engulfed in, by the powers that be.
Yes, indeed.
We're all working on it slowly but surely.
Will.
Yeah. Well,
much love to all y'all. Thanks so much.
To you as well, Robert. Thank you so much
Thank
again.
you.
All right. This is a little bit on syntax and how powerful and important your reality paradigms are dictated and controlled or created by one's mother tongue, one's syntax. Carlos Castaneda in The Active Side of Infinity. A man staring at his equations said that the universe had a beginning. There had been an explosion, he said, a bang of bangs, and the universe was born. And it is expanding, he said. He had even calculated the length of its life, 10 billion revolutions of the Earth around the sun. The entire globe cheered. They found his calculations to be science. None thought that by proposing that the universe began, the man had merely mirrored the syntax of his mother tongue, a syntax which demands beginnings, like birth and developments, like maturation and ends, like death, and statements of facts. The universe began, and it is getting old. The man assured us, and it will die, like all things die, like he himself died after confirming mathematically the syntax of his mother tongue. Did the universe really begin? Is the theory of the Big Bang true? These are not questions. Though they sound like they are, in the syntax that requires beginnings, developments, and ends, as statements of fact and only syntax that exists. That's the real question. There are other syntaxes. There is one, for example, which demands that varieties of intensity be taken as facts. In that syntax, nothing begins and nothing ends. Thus, birth is not a clean, clear-cut event, but a specific type of intensity. And so is maturation, and so is death. A man of that syntax, looking over his equations, finds that he has calculated enough varieties of intensity to say with authority that the universe never began, and it will never end. But that it has gone, and is going now, and will go, through endless fluctuations of intensity. That man could very well conclude that the universe itself is the chariot of intensity, and that one can board it to journey through changes without end. He will conclude all that and much more, perhaps without ever realizing that he is merely confirming the syntax of his mother tongue.
All right, everybody. That was Robert Otey, an interesting guy to say the least. I don't know about you, but my worldview is a little different. I definitely am leaving here today with some things to think about. What did you guys feel about that?
Well, my mind is totally blown. I'm going to have to go, and I feel like I'm starting from square one, but it's very exciting. And, I know that throughout learning and consciousness and general ascension comes with changing and shifting your paradigm. And this certainly was a day that I will remember that quite possibly this has really shifted quite a bit. But like I said, I'm not someone that takes, an opinion and runs with it to fact. Just like he's saying, go and learn about it. Just split open your brain and what's it all about. So I'm looking forward to reading more.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, me too. I could echo that, Julian. He's a really interesting and brilliant guy in his own way, and I admire him for just being who he is and standing by truth as he sees it. I wish more people, or I should say, I wish our culture would really embody that principle of teaching our children and our grandchildren truth. And I know that's a big word, but in a way in which there's honor and respect. And if something is untrue and we discover it to be untrue, well, we acknowledge that and move on as a whole culture, as a whole society, instead of I guess, a lot of the things, like a lot of the cognitive dissonance and a lot of the things in our world that could be fixed, only we're just told that they can't. And so people believe it. So yeah, he's definitely opened my mind up to a lot of things. And I have a new approach to like the solar system and definitely to quantum theory and reality in general. I thank him for that.
Yeah. And, I think what you're saying is having a sense of curiosity. So many times where we learn something, we're taught something, and then that becomes an unmovable, unchangeable, unshakable truth in ourselves. And that's tragic. You should always have the curiosity, always, of the observer and the learner, the student. We're always learning. And that's, in my personal spiritual experience, it never ends.
Yeah, as the Beastie Boys, the king had rock, he said, "I got an open mind. Y'all should all get inside."
No, yeah, just the fact that he gives so much of his work and, decades worth of work away for free, in addition to giving a lot of his music away for free, I think speaks volumes about his dedication to the pursuit of truth, which is beyond admirable, so many people, even in a field of this nature, which is really intended to be one of kind of, like we were just saying, like open-mindedness and doing it for the sake of the good of the people, yet they do all this work and then still demand these exorbitant amounts for their research and et cetera. And just for someone to come out and do it just because he genuinely believes in the truth and wants to share it with people, I think is astonishing,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes, indeed. Admirable,
Absolutely.
honorable for sure.
And it makes me look at his work with even just a new philosophy toward like listening even, because you can tell just in his demeanor and the passion that comes through his voice alone that he is in this for genuine reasons, and I think it shows.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think with what he said, if we were to fall down the rabbit hole, within this show, we could have an entirely different show just based on the principles of the electric universe. There's so many implications here that change almost everything. There's still a few things that I think, that still is in perfect alignment. That still is in perfect alignment. He was talking about octaves and chakras, and he was talking about phi, and all of that is still relevant.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is
Yep.
a relief for me, because if those things were dissolved, I don't know where I'd be right now.
Needless to say, that work is extremely thought provoking.
Yeah.
Talk about a shift in one's consciousness. You know,
Yeah, I hope people will just take it and run with it and do their own. Just really just take the time and do some of your own research.
Yeah.
If any of this stuff prompted, any of these authors that we spoke about or any of these concepts like prompted your interest, don't stop here.
Yeah.
Like just go on Amazon. Actually, you should go through our site.
There
right?
you go.
And buy the book.
But I mean, it's that old Aristotle quote. It's the mark of an educated man to be able to entertain an idea without holding it as true.
Yeah.
Yes.
And to be correct, I don't think you can buy his book on Amazon. Was that?
No.
Yeah, you have to go to his website.
Yeah, you have to go to his website for that.
Which
Yeah.
we will have linked in the
Yeah.
show notes and on the website.
If this show made you angry, good. I encourage you to ask why it makes you so angry, because possibly it's shaking something off. And I'm questioning the same thing right now. So I'm not telling you because I want you to believe it. I'm saying revealing of the truth can be very frustrating, and that's okay. So don't walk away from this information and feel like, fuck this, I'm out. You guys are crazy. You're talking about mushrooms and electricity being more important than gravity and Einstein. What are you saying? Like, listen, this is shocking. It's shaking me to the core, but I welcome it and I'm holding on. And I'm just going to go read more, and that's it.
That touches on the whole cognitive dissonance thing we got in with him.
Yes.
I mean, I'd be lying to you if I told you I didn't think gravity was like totally real yesterday.
Yeah, yeah.
And it takes a tremendous amount of effort and a tremendous amount of self-discipline to be able to look at something that you have held for the entire duration of your life as fundamentally true, and to at least temporarily suspend that belief to entertain another. I mean, that's not an easy thing to do and requires a lot of mental effort.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That process is again, the apophatic process. Like, you have to deconstruct what you think in order to leave enough open-mindedness to learn something more.
Well, and I think it's so true that we don't know what we don't know. And we
So
don't know
true.
that we don't know that we don't know in a lot of cases.
And I know
What's
that.
that,
And I know that.
And I know that, damn it.
It's that. What's that old Alan Watts poem? Have we already said this on the podcast before?
Well, we all love Alan Watts.
Yeah,
Come
just
on.
say it
What's
again.
He says, there once was a young man who said, though, it seems that I know, but what I'd really like to see is the eye that knows me when I know that I know that I know.
Yeah, exactly.
So good. I love
Yeah.
Alan Watts.
See, if we were to be playing hopscotch to that nursery rhyme, life might have been a little different.
Just a
We'd
bit,
be
huh?
brilliant.
Right?
Awesome. Well, hey, guys, thank you all so much for listening. We, again, as always, truly appreciate the fact that you take time out of your day to listen to us talk and to listen to Robert talk. And if you ask me, that's a good way to spend your time, but we still appreciate you guys doing so. So thanks so much. We appreciate from the bottom of all of our hearts all the support that you guys give us, and cannot thank you enough. As always, you can find the show as well as previous shows we've recorded on revelingreality.com. Of course, you'll find all the links to Robert's work and his website, his YouTube channel within the show notes, as well as within the description of the podcast on the website. If you feel so inclined and want to help us keep the show going, there is a support button on the website. You can click donate to give us some money if you would like to contribute to keeping this show going and helping us upgrade our equipment. If you do want to support us without just handing money over, we have our Shop Amazon link, as we just alluded to. Click that, brings you to Amazon. Anything you buy from that point forward, as long as you stay in that window, we get a small kickback of. So no different to you if you already buy on Amazon, and it helps keep the show running, so we'd appreciate that. Of course, if you like the show, feel free to review and rate us on iTunes. Be as candid as you want. We love feedback. And as unfortunate as it is, the reviews and ratings do actually matter quite a bit as far as listing in iTunes. So that will definitely help us out if you guys can take the time out of your day. And last but not least, tell people if you enjoy what we do and you have fun listening to us, why not share it with a friend? It's going to open an interesting conversation at the very least. Yeah, you can find all the info you'll need on revelingreality.com. And, of course, all our social media links and everything are on there for you guys, as well as our older episodes and a whole bunch of fun stuff. So, again, thank you all. We love you. Thanks for listening. See you next week.
Thank you, guys.